But then the angle changes just a little bit and it throws my computer completely out of whack because I didn't practice it like that. I didn't practice the elbow coming out and then coming in. I didn't practice the overhand. I didn't practice the slash. I didn't practice these things. So now I'm bleeding. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about Krav Maga. And whether you like it, you hate it, or you really don't care anything about it, Krav Maga has a lot of benefits. It also has some drawbacks. Today we're going to talk about one in particular. It's going to be the Krav Maga knife defense. Now, whether you've been in Krav Maga or you haven't been in Krav Maga, chances are if you've done a search on YouTube, you've probably seen a few demonstrations and you've probably seen them with a knife and made some judgments from there. Nothing's wrong with that, but today we're going to go a little bit more in depth. All right, so what exactly makes me an authority to be able to make a video like this? And the answer is pretty simple. I've been involved in Krav Maga for quite some time, over 15 years. I got my instructor certification back in 2012, and I have trained and taught it ever since. Now, as far as people that I've trained with some highly talented, highly skilled individuals, and one of which is Eyal Yanilov. Now, if you know anything about Eyal, he was instrumental in building Krav Maga into the system that it is now. Back in the day, Emil Lichtenfeld was like a collection of ideas. He knew how to defend, he knew how to teach people how to defend, but Krav Maga wasn't necessarily systemized as we know it today. Eyal was directly responsible for this. He's an engineer by profession. He will take these ideas and all of these different training sessions that he got from Emi, and he was able to systemize it into a progression to where you're constantly training to get better. And I've spent an excessive amount of time in a lot of various different martial arts, so I have something that I can compare and contrast with, and we all know that no martial art is the best, because if that martial art was the best, we would all be training it. So therefore, when I was young, I decided that I wanted to go out and I wanted to train as many different martial arts as I could so I could find what works best for me. That being said, I'm not saying that the Krav Maga gods made a mistake, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't train Krav Maga because I don't agree with their knife defense. This is a lot of my own opinion and a lot of what I've done to test and see what works for me and what works for my students. All right, so before we get too far off into the weeds here, I want to start talking about what I think could be improved on with the Krav Maga knife defense. So one of the biggest complaints that I have is that in the training situation, in the training session, a lot of the knife defense attacks are not being done as realistically as possible. Now, there could be a couple of reasons for this, and we'll talk about it as we kind of go along. If he's coming over here with an overhand stab, he's kind of coming in a position that's somewhat passive, right? If he's coming in with an underhand stab, he's doing the same thing. He's being somewhat passive. A lot of attacks that you see are not really with the intent to cause a whole lot of damage, because obviously we're in a training scenario, right? And that's good to an extent. And what I mean by that is when you're first learning these different types of attacks and the defenses for them, you need to do baby steps. And what I mean by that is we're both going to be here in a preset position, right? And he's going to come over with that same overhead stab. And when he does that, I'm going to put myself in a position where I can provide the block and I can provide the counterattack. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm wanting to try to be as technical as possible. So when I'm doing my 360, right, I'm actually going to go off into the attack. So when I'm here, I'm attacking this attack before it gains a whole lot of momentum to be able to have the power to stab into me. At the same time, I'm going in for that first simultaneous counterattack. Now, here's the problem. A lot of instructors, be it they don't have the proper education or they just don't realize it, they don't progress from here. Because when it comes to a knife attack, first thing is I'm most likely not going to see this knife. He's going to be coming at me and he's going to have it hidden, because if he announces it to everybody, including me, it gives me more of a one-up on him. He doesn't want to do that, right? So a lot of times what you should do in the progression is try to amp it up a little bit. We're going to start with a little bit more distance. He's going to keep that knife hidden, and I'm not really going to know exactly where it's going to be coming from. He's going to go overhead, right? And then you notice that Even my body positioning was a little bit different because the stress was different. Again, you want to start off with baby steps, but you want to try to progress it as quickly as possible because you want to give somebody something more realistic. You don't want to give them role playing. The second point that I want to make is that a lot of times we tend to get a little bit too one shot, one kill. And what I mean by that is we'll do this defense, and then I come in for that 360, and I come in for that counterattack, and then all of a sudden, my attacker loses all of his smoke. And then he lets me go through and do all these really cool counterattacks, and I'm gonna take the knife away and all that good stuff, right? Wrong. Realistically, if he's coming at me with a knife, even if I do happen to block that first shot by the grace of God, right? It's not going to be that one shot that I have to worry about. Even if I hit him in the face, he's already amped up because he's coming to stab me, right? So when he's coming over, and if I go for this one shot and I've drilled it with just one shot my whole Krav Maga career, and I'm thinking that I'm going to be able to take this hand, throw a knee, throw a hammer fist, and all this kind of stuff, and he pulls back and does the sewing machine on me, I'm screwed. And that goes for every knife attack that we have, right? Whether it's overhand like this, and he just keeps rapid firing on me, or if he's going straight stab, right? And he just keeps rapid firing on me. If I'm just used to doing that one counterattack, because that's how I've trained it, I'm gonna end up in a world of hurt. So the next problem that I have with a lot of the knife defense, and again, keep in mind, this isn't on every single knife defense that Krav Maga has. There are a few in particular that I think could be done a lot better. There are some that give you a fighting chance. Again, nothing's perfect. But the next problem that I have is that a lot of the knife defense that you do keeps you on the inside of this knife. And what I mean by that is, we'll go back with the overhand real quick. What I mean by that is that once I've given this first counterattack, and I'm gonna go through the training progression, and I go to scoop this arm and stretch him out, and I'm doing my counterattacks and all that kind of stuff. Again, I'm counting on that first counterattack to miraculously make him go brain dead. Essentially, I'm still staying on the inside of this knife, right? If especially with Chris being as strong as he is, if he were to give me just a little bit of resistance, I'm already in a bad spot. Even if I've got this checked, I'm already in a bad spot. And I can hear people now, well, just throw more counterattacks. That's not always going to be your answer. I've already hit him pretty solid. And even if I didn't hit him pretty solid, the more that I stay engaged on the inside here, the bigger the chance is for me to get in a really bad situation. Same thing if it's coming up underhand. If he's coming up underhand and I'm staying here, right? If he pulls that knife back, essentially I'm still on the inside. This is not a good place to be when it comes to a knife. If you have absolutely nothing else, I'm not saying that this wouldn't be a little bit beneficial for you, but you always want to be thinking about, how do I get to the outside of this knife to where I'm not facing every bit of power that he has, not only with this knife, but with both hands, with both feet. Another thing that you won't see in a whole lot of Krav classes is that once I go to defend this knife, if it's here, what about this hand? Yeah, I just do that counterattack, but if he's a grappler, what's the first thing that he's going to do to me? He's going to grab me. Even if I throw this counterattack, and it was a good counterattack, but he's strong, what am I going to do now? I'm putting myself in a very, very volatile situation, and I don't want to do that. Another one of the issues that I have when it comes to Krav Maga knife defense is sometimes there are too many decisions to make because there's too many different types of defenses that you can be doing. And what I mean by that is, if he's coming back with that overhand, I have that 360. Now, going from the overhand to the underhand, you don't really change it all that much because it's still 360. Now, I'm still using the same arm, providing that he's using the same arm, and I'm still using the same type of block. But if he comes at me with a straight stab, right, then I have to do a different one, right? If he comes at me with a straight stab from here, I have to do a different one. If he's coming at me from behind, you have to learn all these different types of defenses. And now granted, with the knife, it's not as bad as it is with other defenses within the system. However, you're not gonna have a whole lot of time to think when somebody's trying to stab you with a knife. Going back to the original point of, he's not gonna let me know this is coming. If you have to make these these different decisions in your mind of how you're going to act whenever you're under a real threat from a real knife, you're going to hesitate. So the point that the point that I want to demonstrate here is that, say that we've been practicing this overhand, right? We've done the reps, we've got the muscle memory and all that kind of stuff. What happens if I come for this overhand and then I turn it into a thrust? Or what happens if I come for this overhand and I turn it into a slash, right? He's already going to be reacting to this little motion that he's already seen, right? And the same thing goes with a straight stab. If I come in for that straight stab and he does that inside defense, what happens if I come here? What happens if I come here? What happens is that you have all these set defenses that you've practiced a very particular sort of way inside of your head. So I'm already sitting here trying to make that decision real quick of like, oh my God, where's the knife? Oh, I'm trying to make that decision. I'm already hesitating. But then the angle changes just a little bit and it throws my computer completely out of whack because I didn't practice it like that. I didn't practice the elbow coming out and then coming in. I didn't practice the overhand. I didn't practice the slash. I didn't practice these things. So now I'm bleeding. So another thing that I think could be improved on vastly is that when you're seeing these Krav Maga knife defenses, you see a lack of maneuverability. And what I mean by that is we're going to pull on the system of pekiti-tirsia just for a minute. When we're doing anything that has to do with any sort of weapon, when we're doing anything at all, we're always going from a place of striking to maneuver or maneuvering to strike. So whenever I'm here and I'm trying to focus on these different knife defenses, instead of moving straight in to my aggressor, if he's coming with that overhand, instead of moving straight into my attacker, essentially putting myself at a point where bad things can happen pretty quickly. Again, if your attacker is stronger than you, or if he's just not feeling what it is that you're dishing out and you're going straight in to the inside of him, you're setting yourself up for vast disappointment. What I'm talking about with maneuverability is instead of going straight in, I want to try to get more towards the outside. And that could be going towards the flank of the weapon here, right? To where I'm on the outside of the weapon, or it could be that I'm going away from the weapon and having to make him readjust. So if he's coming, right, now I'm here, he has to readjust to be able to find exactly where it is that I'm at, and it gives me just a little bit more. Now, this is good if I see the attack coming, but there's always that chance that I'm not going to see that attack coming. Hopefully I've paid attention to my environment and could probably read his intentions, but that's not always going to be the case. So if I'm here and he gets in close enough to me and I see him starting to move, well then I'm going to maneuver back, but I'm not going to go straight back, because if I go straight back, he can move forward towards me faster and more efficiently than I can move back in a straight line, which means that, especially with his intent, he's going to be able to catch me in no time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move off the X, essentially. From here, I see him coming in, I'm moving off on that 45. I get a little bit more distance. I'm still at a point of advantage because I'm still facing him, whereas he's kind of going off the line and he has to readjust. Now, keep in mind that even if I go back on that 45, right, I'm not staying here. I'm not just going to stay here and be like, I won that one, yay. I'm going back into that attack as quickly as possible. So from here, and we'll go kind of slow speed. Here, scoot back just a little bit. We'll go kind of slow speed. As he's coming here, I'm coming back, and then I'm initiating. Well, there's a knife there. Yeah, I'm going to address that, but this is where it starts. The last point that I want to make on what I think Krav Maga can improve on their knife defense is going to be disarms. Now, if you know anything about a knife fighting, knife training, doesn't matter. If you know anything about a knife, disarms probably rank pretty low on your priority list. And the reason why I bring that up is because Krav Maga likes to get in these types of positions here to where I defended the knife, I control the knife, and I threw my counterattack. Now I'm going to go through this disarm. Well, if you've been listening to the video all the way up until this point, you already realize a few things that are wrong with this. For one, he's not just going to stand there and just let me do all my really cool stuff, right? His intention, obviously, is to stab me. He's going to keep trying to stab me. So that already negates the disarm. Another point here is I'm staying to the inside. The more that I try to stay focused on this weapon, the more of a chance it is for me to end up in a bad position. Now, what about counterattacks? What about beating him into submission? Here's a couple of caveats here. For one, if I counterattack and I nailed this counterattack and it was absolutely perfect, and maybe I go to control the weapon and then I nail him with another counterattack. If he drops that knife from here, I did a successful disarm. That should be the only disarm that I'm looking for. And here's the main point behind that, is once I'm here and I start trying to wrestle this knife away from him, and maybe he's not ready to let it go, I'm spending too much time locked up with this, and I'm allowing myself to get in a worse and worse position. He has another hand. He has two other legs. He has a head. And if he's a grappler, the first thing that he's going to do is try to take me down. And the reason why I keep bringing up grappling is because grappling, if you don't know what you're doing, puts you in a pretty rough position. Grappling when you don't know what you're doing and there's a knife involved, even if you do know what you're doing and there's a knife involved, puts you in a really bad position. So I don't want to stay there and allow that to happen. So I'm not going to try to go for this disarm. Plus, it's not my knife. I don't give a shit about this knife. I'm going to do my counterattack and then I'm going to get out of there. Another issue that I think needs to be brought up is Krav Maga is not only supposed to be for men, but it's supposed to be for women as well. Now, here's the thing. Women tend to have smaller hands. Women tend to not be as strong as men. So even if I land in this position and I have this double hand control on this knife, a lot of this is going to be strength based. A lot of this is going to depend on having long enough fingers to be able to strip that knife out. For women, this isn't that practical. It's a lot better just to pin this knife to that body, push them away, and then get out of there. Disarms, they look flashy, they look cool. Everybody wants to learn them. But in the realm of actually having to defend yourself against the knife, that should be the last thing that you're worried about. If it happens by just pure luck, then it happens, that's great, good for you. Don't chase this. All right, so we spent a considerable amount of time talking about the things that I feel like Krav Maga got wrong as far as knife defense is concerned. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about things that I think they did pretty good. First thing that I want to bring up is the different defenses to different types of knife threats. Now, I know you're probably wondering what's the difference between that and what we've already been seeing. What we've already been seeing is knife attacks. Knife threats are a little bit different because the attack itself hasn't been initiated yet. And the important distinction is the attack, he's already set on violence. He's trying to make me bleed. The threat, he's trying to get something from me. Now, one of the most basic is we'll have this knife right up against my neck and this will be the threat. Now from here, I'm going to react in a certain way that's going to allow me to get space between my neck and the knife. Also, it's going to allow me to have just a little bit of control, and I'm automatically throwing those counterattacks to try to sway the situation back into my favor. And these threats can go from right up against the neck, it can go on the other side, right? And I'm making the same type of movement. It can be down low to where I'm actually having to address this and then throw my counterattacks. It can be as complex as you want to make it. But again, the distinction is there, that there's a difference between a threat and an already initiated attack. Now, speaking on that, I want to talk a little bit about one of the principles that I think is absolutely fantastic when it comes to all of Krav training, but specifically for the knife. The main principle of addressing the present danger, which in this case is going to be the knife, right? And then controlling the weapon. Now, this is done all throughout Krav Maga, whether it's a grab, whether it's a gun, whether it's an attack. I need to address the present danger. Again, in this case, it's going to be the knife, right? I'm not worried about this punch. I'm not worried about the headbutt. I'm not worried about anything else other than the fact that this knife is very close to me and it can cause damage. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to address this. And then from here, I'm going to focus on controlling the weapon. Now, notice a few of the things that I've already talked about before. And in training different systems of martial arts, a lot of times you see things starting to kind of cross paths with each other. And this is one of the ones that I love the most, is that when it comes to the knife threat, I'm already working my way towards the outside. Again, I don't want to stay in front of this weapon because it's really easy to get back on me. But if I'm off to the side, and again, I've already nailed the counterattack and so on and so forth, I'm already on this outside shoulder. I'm already on the outside of this knife. So it makes controlling this knife a lot easier. Now, here's the caveat to that. If I'm in this position and he's got this knife thread on me, and I've already come to the outside, I've delivered a counterattack, and I go to two-hand control this weapon, if he's still fighting, I have an issue, right? Exactly. And it's the punch that I'm worried about. Yes, I can kick, I can knee, I can headbutt, I can do all these things, but he still has a weapon here. Yes, you do want to control the weapon, but you also want to control the situation. Having two hands on this knife does me absolutely no good if he knocks me out and then stabs me because I pissed him off. Another thing that I think that they did absolutely wonderful, and when I say they, I don't mean everybody, because let's face it, you can throw a stone halfway across the parking lot and hit 3 really, really bad Krav instructors. On the flip side of that, there are some really good guys out there as well. And the good guys, what they do is they realize that there are these holes. They realize that there's a difference in choreography and practicality. One of the things that the good guys that I've seen that I really like and I really respect is that when they're doing these different types of knife defenses and knife trainings, they will spend a very minimal amount of time on the stuff on the building blocks, on the building the progression, learning the basics. They'll spend a very little amount of time on, if this knife comes in on me, right, on just a really basic form of the defense. But after that, they immediately start putting it into a position, into a situation where the pressure is up and it's high. Not only that, but another thing that they like to do is they'll teach you one knife defense and then they'll teach you another knife defense. They'll make you have to make decisions under a very high stressful environment. And what I mean by that is, yes, we have the knife threat. If I go to defend the knife threat and I'm here and say I land my first counterattack, it gives me a little bit of distance. Now he's gonna come in with that straight stab, or he's gonna come with a slash, or he's gonna come with something else. I have to be able to adjust, and I have to be able to adapt. These are two things that when you're training self-defense, you absolutely must have. Another thing that I absolutely love about some of the Krav knife defense is that it is built in within the system to have a wide margin of error. And what I mean by that is when I'm doing these defenses, I'm usually doing it with my forearm. That's the hardest part of my arm, per se, outside of my elbow, but it also gives me a lot of space to be able to make a really bad defense, but still make it work. So if he's coming at me with that overhead and I'm here, I'm going with my forearm on this, but if for some reason, because I'm being attacked with a knife and the stress is really high, if this is not completely on, right, I can still provide a wall of defense without having to adjust too much. Because let's face it, when it comes to these types of attacks in real life, the pressure is going to be on and my motor skills aren't going to be what they normally otherwise would be. If I'm using the whole forearm as a way to defend this knife, then I have a wide margin of error. And I think that's absolutely brilliant because let's face it, we're not going to be 100% when we get attacked by a knife. If we're walking around at 100%, we're probably not going to look like a good victim, and the guy's going to go to the next guy that is not doing as well as we are. Now, the last point that I want to make on things that I think are really good, especially training-wise in Krav Maga knife defense, is that there's a high emphasis on surprise attacks from different angles. And what I mean is, we're not always just standing here straight on, because let's face it, nobody's going to call our name and get our attention right before they decide to stab us. It may happen. Maybe it's a personal vendetta. However, chances are they're going to try to get the drop on us. And if that means that they have to stab me off from the side, that's what they're going to go for. One of the things that Krav has done is they've taken this kind of into consideration, and there's a whole slew of different types of scenarios and situations that you put yourself in training and you're defending this knife from different positions. So if I'm here and I see him here, I'm going to adjust, but I'm going to go straight from that position that I'm at. And that goes all the way around the body. We've gone through and we've talked about things that I think could be improved. We've talked about things that I think they got right. So now we're going to talk about things that, looking outside of this particular system, that you might be able to find your answers elsewhere. And what I mean by that is, again, I have an extensive background in martial arts, and one of those martial arts that I train diligently every day is pekiti-tirsia. I train Filipino martial arts for a number of different reasons, but one of the main ones is, and I tell all my students this, I tell everybody this, that if you want to learn how to grapple efficiently, go find yourself somebody who specializes in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If you want to learn sensitivity training, go find somebody who specializes in Wing Chun Kung Fu. If you want to learn how to defend against a knife, or how to use a knife, or how to use any kind of bladed weapon whatsoever, you go learn Filipino martial arts. One of the things that I love most about Filipino martial arts is that there is a very high skill transferability. And what I mean by that is you start learning everything from the stick weapon. And with the stick, I'm learning different ways to manipulate this weapon, so to speak. I learn how to strike with my slashes. I learn how to strike with my thrusts. And then I learn how to attack. I learn how to defend. I learn how to move. I learn every in and out on how to use this weapon. Now, the cool thing about this is that once I drop the stick and I pick up a knife, I don't have to train anything knife specific, because I've already been training with the stick. Everything else is the same. The angles are the same. The thrusts are the same. The way that I move my body is the exact same. Now, there is a difference in a forward grip and a reverse grip, but it doesn't change the tactics. I don't have to learn a separate system to learn the knife, and I don't have to learn a separate system to learn how to do this empty hand. Now, here's where it kind of comes into play in the context that we're talking about now. The first thing that we start doing is we start learning how to strike each other knife to knife. So when I'm here, we'll learn the angle 1, which is 1, and then 2. After that, we'll go reverse grip, and we'll learn the angle 1 and then the angle 2. Now, as we go along, we get more proficient in these angles. We're already learning how to strike with a weapon, obviously, but then we start learning how to use the same motion to defend. All right, so giving you just a little bit more of an in-depth look at what pekiti-tirsia has to offer when it comes to knife defense, I'm going to kind of take you through the progression, although we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. You can find that in other videos, or you can find an instructor who specializes in pekiti-tirsia, and you can train with them and learn these for yourself. Or you can watch some of our other videos, because we do cover a lot of that material in there as well. So the first thing that I'm going to do is we're going to be knife to knife, and I know that we're talking about knife defense, but again, this is to kind of introduce to you the transfer of skill, right? The first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to get with a forward grip, and we're going to learn the thrusting system from the forward grip. It's only 3 movements, so it doesn't take long to learn. From here, I'm going to start off with my thumb on my belt off to my side. From here, I'm going to thrust at a diagonal across the body coming up. And what we're going to do is we're going to do this at the same time so we can both get the training reps in. I'm thrusting right across the body. Now, I want to make sure that I don't reach out too far, because I do have a knife, and if you reach out too far, I'm going to start attacking that hand, right? So you want to thrust, kind of keeping it in close to the body. I don't want to reach out too much, because again, this is a very personal type of attack, right? I'm not going to come in or I'm not going to try to stab you from way out here. I want to make sure that I'm nice and in close. So from here, I'm coming right across the body. From here, I'm going to turn the hand over to where the tip of the blade is pointed towards him. I'm going to go broken attack, and I'm going to stop right at the neck. From here, we're going to switch, going to the other side, and then I'm coming all the way around, right? This is how you train it on the body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand here. He's going to go 1, 2, and 3, right? And then I'm going to do it. From here, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, right? And then you progress that way. Now, from here, we're going to go ahead and switch to that reverse grip. The thrusting on the reverse grip is again, it's only 3 movements, and it's going to be that angle 1, angle 2, and then straight overhead. 1, 2, straight overhead. Now, you can do these on the body as well, and I would advise doing so, because the more reps that you get in on this, you're already training your defenses. You just don't realize it yet. Going back to that forward grip, we're going to initiate the knife tapping sequence. So from here, when he goes to do that number 1 thrust, I'm going to do that number 1 thrust as if I had that reverse. So he goes back, and I'm coming at number 1 thrust on that reverse. If you notice, it's the same motion, right? So he comes with that thrust, freeze. It is that same motion. Now, I want to make sure that I'm getting offline. I don't want to stand here and just really hope this works. Because again, I don't know what kind of attack is coming. I just know that the knife is here and it's going on this trajectory. It could be a broken strike. He could be coming here and then pulling it back. He could be trying to go for spine. I don't know. So I want to make sure that I'm getting offline so I can further protect myself. But not only just for protection, it also puts me in a really good point to continue the fight from there. So from here, I'm going off to the outside. Now, he's going to do his number 2 thrust, and I'm going to do my number 2 thrust from my reverse grip. Now, I'm also sneaking the other hand up, and I'm controlling the elbow from here. If I try to control the wrist, and he brings this knife back into my body, there's not going to be much that I can do to stop that. If I try to control the shoulder or higher up in the arm, he has this whole lever of movement that he can make. Now, if I'm here, he comes in with that number 2 thrust. If I'm here, go to the number 2. If I'm here and I have this elbow, I have control over this weapon. Now, he can pull and he can still move, but I have enough control to where I can go through and do whatever it is that I need to do. Now, from here, we're going to go into that number 3 thrust. So he's going to swing. I'm going to pass this through. Here, let's move to the other side. I'm going to pass this through. He's going to come for that number 3, and I'm shooting that vertical thrust from the reverse grip down to his body here. Now, this is just a simple drill to be able to learn the knife tapping, where you're starting to train the defensive aspect. As he comes in with that number 1 thrust, I'm here and I'm coming off to that side. He transitions to make that number 2. I'm here and I'm still controlling the arm. Here, let's switch sides. I'm gonna pass this through, and then I'm coming in and I'm driving that down. And if you're lucky, you'll pick up a extra headbutt.
Get a good headbutt.
Now I can hear it now. I thought you said you don't want to be on the inside. How come on that number 3 thrust you're on the inside? Very good question, and a very simple answer. When I'm here and he's coming very wide in for this thrust, there's not very many ways, unless I'm already really, really close in, that I'm going to be able to get to this outside. There are ways, but it's kind of out of the scope of what we're talking about here now. Now, if I was here, then I can get to the outside, but that's a whole different tactic altogether. You're going to have to wait for that video. What happens if he is coming in with the reverse grip? So he switches, and now he's coming in for that thrust, or that other thrust from the other side, or that straight down thrust that we already went over. What happens if I do that? Bringing the knife back into play, all I'm going to do is just angle 2s. So if he comes in with that angle 1, I'm coming here with that angle 2. If he comes in with that angle 2, I'm coming in here with this angle 2. If he comes in with that overhead, I'm coming in with that angle 2. If I lose the knife, I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm coming in with that angle 2. And notice how I'm working my way to the side. I'm going to get that double arm control if I can. If he comes in with that angle 2, I'm doing the same thing. If he comes in with that straight, I'm doing the same thing. So going back to my original point, once you start learning the stick, the skills immediately transfer over into the knife. Once you start learning the knife, the skills transfer directly to empty hand. This doesn't necessarily mean that all Krav is bad. This doesn't mean that all Krav knife defense is bad. Again, it kind of goes back to who you're learning from, who taught them, and how you train. Again, I want to bring the point in is that if you're learning something specific, again, a knife, a gun, boxing, fighting, whatever, it's not a bad idea to look out and see other perspectives, because that other perspective may have that missing piece for something that you're already training. And if nothing else, maybe you get a little bit better and a little bit more validation out of what you're already doing. I want to thank my main man, Chris, for coming out here and letting me hit him, and for stabbing me and all these cool things that we've done so far.
Many more to come.
Shindu Maki.
Shindu Maki.
Well, they've been really bad showing up for a knife video.
Well, we're going to have to do it with live blade.
Like,
Wait a second.
I didn't sign up for this shit.
Wait a second. You just hit me.
I'm bleeding. I'm bleeding.
We all walked in here like,
You're like, good job, Chris. Thanks. Yes.